Hey everybody, welcome back to the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. I'm your host, Gordo Gams. Welcome back to the full card breakdown. This time for UFC 305, we are down under in Perth for another phenomenal pay-per-view card. 12 fights on tap, all leading towards Plessis versus Adesanya for that middleweight belt. It's gonna be fun, man. It is a very fun pay-per-view, one with a lot of wide favorites, a lot of hometown guys, and one that I'm just excited to break down as a whole. Now, 12 fights, some interesting ones. I do not want to waste any more time. Just quickly before we hop in, hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel. Dana White Contender Series is back, so make sure you check that out. Me and Liam do videos every week, alternating weeks, once on his, once on my channel. So this weekend will be on my channel here. And aside from that, check out Establish the Run, check out Coolbet, and without any further ado, let's do this. Get the fight started with the 8-0 Stuart Nicoll versus the 10-2 Jesus Aguilar. We have the debutant Nicoll this week, hometown guy taking on the veteran here in Aguilar, and what is a pretty interesting flyweight matchup. Now, Nicoll's a guy who has had some decent success in the regional scene. Undefeated so far, has shown off a very good ground game and ability to go out there, push a pace, solid leg kicks on the feet as well, although he is hittable, and is a guy who is a pretty well-rounded prospect. Low level of competition, it's hard to really gauge where this will really bring him in the UFC, but he's taking on Jesus Aguilar this week, a guy who is maybe not the highest level of UFC talent, but a guy who's got a couple wins in the UFC. Back-to-back wins, that one highlight reel knockout over Shannon Ross that we'll talk about shortly, and then a controversial one against Mendoza that's last time. Jesus Aguilar is a very interesting style, shorter stature, not the best striker in the feet, kind of got those T-Rex arms, but we saw he does have power like he did against Shannon Ross. Not really known for his knockouts, though. A guy who does have a decent hook on the feet, but is more so a, let's say, opportunistic grappler. He doesn't have the best entries on his takedown. He's not a takedown machine himself, but he has a good guillotine that gets to the mat. He can threaten submissions, and on the feet, he is able to wing punches, potentially win optics that way. As a whole, though, when I do break down this fight, though, I do think Nicoll's going to be the aggressor. I do think Nicoll's going to be the one landing the more damaging and better optics on the feet with the straighter shots and the leg kicks. And I do think more times than not, Nicoll's going to be the one ending up on top position. We have seen Aguilar taken down. We have seen him put in precarious situations. And although Aguilar has that dangerous guillotine, which is something you can definitely factor in here, I think that is his major path to victory. I think when it comes to winning over the crowd in Australia, when it comes to winning the optics, winning the minutes, and maybe even winning the striking exchanges, I do favor Nicoll here, and he's my pick to win. It was not long ago where Jesus Aguilar was, what, minus 120 against Shannon Ross. That's for a reason. He does not have the longest reach division, not the best striker, not the best offensive wrestling, but does have a dangerous submission game. So I wouldn't be surprised if we got that submission, but more times than not, I think Nicoll wins the minutes. I think he gets it done. I do think he is the better option of the two. DraftKings wise, there are some questions to be answered. I mean, we still haven't really seen Nicoll go out there and face the best level of competition, but we have seen him be a proactive grappler. At $9,000, he does have that ability to go out there, shoot takedowns, land them, score pretty well on DraftKings because of it, and he will be one of the options I'm looking up to in this top range. This top range is interesting. We do have a 9,800, we do have a 9,600, but he is someone who I will like to target. He does have grappling upside, and he is someone who I do not mind playing this week. Aguilar, I think his path to victory is rooted in submission upside, so I will have some of him due to that guillotine upside, but more times than not, I do think he loses this fight, and for that reason, maybe not the most ownership of him at 7.2K. I will sprinkle some of him in GPP due to that upside, but more times than not, I do think he gets out-controlled, out-grappled, and even out-struck on the feet, and I do think he loses this fight. So, a lot of live underdogs this week. I do not fault anyone for taking the shot on Aguilar against an unexperienced guy here like Nicoll. His path to victory does score well on DraftKings. I just don't know how often he gets it. Next up, 21-8 Kanong Song versus 22-8-2 Ricky Glenn. Interesting one, because we have not had the best recollection of Ricky Glenn so far. He's been knocked out in his past few, facing a solid level of competition, but his chin seems to be deteriorating, and he seems to be getting up there in age. The funny part about this one is he's not even a full year older than someone like Kanong Song, and Kanong Song is being a larger favorite because of the chin deficiencies. Kanong Song, he himself is a solid striker. 9 wins by knockout, solid pull counter, solid power with the strikes as well. And a guy who's more so looking to win the moments rather than the minutes. On the feet, he can be outstruck, he can be outlanded. His chin has failed him sometimes, but has held up. And I do think in this matchup, he will have the better durability of the two in a guy, Ricky Glenn. Ricky Glenn does have the ability to go out there and strike in all aspects. At one point in time, he was very well-rounded, had grappling success, had striking upside, but he's losing his aggression. His durability is definitely not there. And when it comes down to seeing a primary way I see this fight playing out, I think more times than not, his chin gets rocked at some point. Kanong Song, always although not the most voluminous striker, I don't even know why I said it like that, but a guy who doesn't throw the most volume is still very, very powerful. A guy who I still think is able to land in the chin of Ricky Glenn more times than not. At the end of the day, that is my prediction here in this matchup. I don't really want to play juice on a guy like Kanong Song, not the best minute winner, can be taken down, can be controlled. And I do think Ricky Glenn has passed to win this fight, but at the end of the day, the guy who I think I can trust more, who does the better durability, who does land the more powerful shots, is a guy in Kanong Song, and I do think it's only a matter of time before he sends Ricky Glenn packing here one more time. I cannot trust the durability of Ricky Glenn, and therefore I will be picking Song Kanong here. DraftKings wise, like I said, tough to really trust on. He's 8.7K this week. He has had opportunities to go out there and score well. Scored 107 against Potter, 131 against Nash, 93 against Aldana. When he's gotten these knockouts, he scored very, very well. But when he's not getting them, I mean, his decision win against Bedoya scored 73. Decision against Cran scored not even 60 points. So he's a guy who is really extremely boomer bust. I will sprinkle some of him in at 8.7K just because he does have knockout upside against an older fighter. He is someone who I do think in GPP formats can work well in this mid-range, but he is extremely boomer bust. Is more of a contrarian play in this mid-range. I don't mind him for tournaments. Not my favorite play for cash. And then Glenn, he does have a ground path to victory, but I do prefer other underdogs than him. I do think Song Kanon wins this fight more times than not, and he's my pick to win. Let's move on to the next. Next up, we have 7-1 Tom Nolan versus the 13-4 Alex Reyes, and what is a really lopsided matchup in terms of the odds, let's put it that way. Tom Nolan fighting in front of that home crowd is 9.8K on DraftKings, minus 1,700 on some books at time of filming, a very large favorite. And what he is a very explosive fighter. A ton of round one finishes, we saw that last time. Very good power on the feet, solid jiu-jitsu game as well, a very explosive prospect round one. Now, he is not without his flaws. He can be hit, he can be taken down, and I do think the right level opponent can really throw issues to him here. But he is facing on a guy in Alex Reyes, a guy who is turning 38 here shortly, a guy who had a huge layoff before his last fight, and a guy who just hasn't had the most going for him. He had an infected spinal canal. He was really sick. He was a guy who wasn't able to go out there and even walk, and he made an incredible recovery. It was a phenomenal story. It was great. But at this point in time, he is still a bit undersized in this matchup, a guy who was looked really slow last time, and a guy who just shouldn't be in there after such a wild procedure he went through. He doesn't have the best durability. He hasn't been training for the year before that, and although it's great he can make it to the cage, when it comes down to fighting a guy like Tom Nolan, he's still, I think, going to be slower, at a reach disadvantage, at a power disadvantage, and definitely there to be hit. With only 2 fights in the last 7 years and being finished in both of them, it is a very dangerous thing to trust here, Reyes, and that is why Tom Nolan is such a large favorite. Do I want to play chalk on Tom Nolan? Probably not, but I do think he wins. I guess the one thing I can say about Nolan is he's there to be hit. He was knocked out in his one loss, and I guess Alex Reyes always has a puncher's chance. But more times than not, I do think Tom Nolan gets the win. Not the most in-depth breakdown there. I do think he gets it done early. The question is 9.8K. Like, that is a really high price tag, and yes, he has the opportunity to go out there and win early, but he got a first-round finish last time, scored 105 points, and that's not going to cut at 9.8K. He is a very expensive salary this week, and I do think he is extremely boomer bust. He pretty much needs that first-minute knockout. Can he get it? Potentially, but it's so hard to rely on it. I'd much rather go elsewhere. It's so hard to pay up for him, but he is an easy cash lock because he is someone who you can... Yeah, that's not true. He's a cash lock if you can afford him, because he should win this fight a lot of the time. A very hefty favorite here, and a guy who should win at a high clip, but you're going to need every single domino to fall perfectly for him here. Should win this fight at a high clip. It's hard for him to live off his salary at 9.8K. If you can afford him, go ahead, get a great option up top. However, there may be some better options if you need to save salary this week. And right below him on DraftKings, 9.6K, we have Jack Jenkins, 12-3 versus the 11-5 Herbert Burns. Another interesting fight to break down. Hometown guy once again, a very large favorite. Herbert Burns is doing the most ironic thing of all time and taking a fight on short notice. And the reason why that is so ironic is Herbert Burns is the original gas bag. He is a guy who has maybe 5 minutes of cardio, and then he just absolutely loses it. His cardio is non-existent. His durability, his resiliency is non-existent after the first 5 minutes. But he's extremely explosive in that first round. Solid knees, solid power, and phenomenal jiu-jitsu game. He is one of the best jiu-jitsu practitioners we've seen. He just can't do it for more than maybe even 2, 3, 4 minutes at this point. And now he's going into enemy territory on short notice. That's the reason he's such a big underdog here in this price tag. Jack Jenkins is a well-rounded fighter here, a guy who I've loved to back in the past, a very likable guy fighting in front of his home country, and a guy who does have a lot of advantages. Better cardio, better striking, better technicality, better physicality, I think, here as well, and a guy who can be present after the 5-minute mark. And I do think for that reason, he deserves his price tag. Of course, there's always an opportunity for Burns to catch him in transition, to get that submission, but it's pretty rare. I think more times than not, Jack Jenkins survives the first and makes him quit in the second. And I do think because of that, he's a solid option up top as well. 9.6K, pretty large favorite. To me, when I'm playing this one, I do think it goes under 2.5 rounds. That is probably juiced, so we'll look at the odds. But another interesting option is because without that first round finish, you are hoping for a ton of volume and him to accumulate points before Burns slows down. And I think although a possibility, something that he can do, at 9.6K, it has to be a pretty heavy score. I mean, he has to outscore Nolan, Gamrot, Prates, Nicoll. It is a very big ask, and without much grappling equity from Jenkins, it's going to be based off of knockdowns and striking volume, which I don't think is necessarily too easy to obtain at 9.6K. So for that reason, I'm telling you right now, it's going to be super hard for me to get up to him at 9.6K as well. I think he wins this fight a large majority of the time, but he needs to hit his perfect ceiling in order to hit the optimal lineup, and with all the high scorers on this slate this week, I think it is really hard for me to trust him to do so at 9.6K. I'd rather get to Nolan at 9.8 because you think he has more round one finish equity. I'd rather pay down to get Gamrot. If I can get to Jenkins, I don't mind him. He's a solid midway contrarian play, but I'm not forcing him into my lineups. I think that's very plausible. He just gets a second round win, scores 100 points, and doesn't make it in the optimal lineup. So I like Jenkins. I think he wins at a high clip. I will be picking him to win. However, I might even like Herbert Burns more on DraftKings. 6.6K. The only times he's won, he scored 98 and 110. Complete punt play. I don't think he wins, but when he does, will score amazing. Give me Jack Jenkins. Maybe not the most of him on DraftKings, but I do think he wins this fight nonetheless. Next up, 9-2 King Casey O'Neill versus the 8-1 Luana Santos. In a very interesting fight. I do love Casey O'Neill. I bet on her a lot. It's cost me sometimes. I do like the girl. I think she's a fun prospect to watch and someone who I do think could have some decent promise. Still pretty green here in the UFC. Yes, someone who has 4 wins at the UFC, but before this was fighting a lower level of competition, was yet to be really tested. And now that she's taken that step up, she lost to Maya, she lost to Da Silva, and it's interesting to see where she is now. She's now facing Luana Santos, who you could argue is even more raw than her at this point of his career, but someone who has had a little bit of hype behind her. A judo practitioner, solid ground game, decent strike in the feet as well, was a large favorite last time, got a dominant first round finish, and now is the favorite on short notice against the girl in Casey O'Neill in front of her hometown. And the way I see this fight playing out is, yes, early on, Luana Santos is very dangerous. She's physical. She could have some ground success against a girl in Casey O'Neill, and she could dominate this fight. So you could look hindsight, minus 300 with that judo early on. But as the fight goes, I favor Casey O'Neill's volume. I favor her cardio. I favor her minute-winning ability. And I favor the crowd behind her. And as this fight goes on, it becomes more and more favored towards the Casey O'Neill side of things. I think when we look at breaking down this fight, I think it's either Luana Santos early by domination or Casey O'Neill picking this up as the fight goes on if she's able to survive. And for that reason, I'm really struggling on who to pick. Because of the way the line is, I think I'm going to side with the dog, cheer for the hometown girl, cheer for someone like Casey O'Neill who I do like to back. But truthfully, a tough fight to call. With the cardio and volume and optics that O'Neill does have, though, I do think it's tough to make her an underdog in this matchup, though. I do think she has some opportunities to get it done. DraftKings-wise, actually an interesting fight to target because Casey O'Neill scored very well on DraftKings. 121, 131, 109, 140. Phenomenal scores here, and I do think if she wants to win this fight, it's going to come with a ton of volume as the fight goes on. She is a very live underdog at 7.6K, though. But I also don't mind someone like Santos. 8.6, she has 3 wins in the UFC, 101, 83, 116. I think when she wins fight a lot of the time, it's going to come with early domination, takedown upsides, threatening submissions, threatening ground and pound. And I do think if she wants to win this fight, she's going to have to get her out of there early. So I do think she has a pretty high ceiling at 8.6K. I will sprinkle her in for GPP. I think when she wins this fight, she dominates. It's just how often does she do so? So give me both sides on DraftKings. I think I ended up picking O'Neill, and we'll stick with that here. Should be a fun fight. Next up, 11-3-1 Josh Culibao versus the 16-6 Ricardo Ramos. A fun fight. I like Culibao, fun, active striker, another hometown guy here who is favored, and a guy who I do think has some promise. I like his hands, I like his power, I like his ability to make reads as the fight goes on. Ramos is extremely dangerous. He's got those spinning attacks. He's got a very solid ground game if he gets there, and I do think, if Culibao slips and Ramos is on top, Ramos is a very dangerous grappler. More times than not, the way this fight is playing out, in my opinion, is on the feet. And on the feet, I do favor Culibao's power. I favor his accuracy. I favor his volume. I do think more times than not, Culibao is the better striker, getting the pop from the Australian crowd here behind him. And for that reason, I am going to pick him in this matchup. Not only that, but Ricardo Ramos is a really tough guy to trust. He does have a solid finishing game, but you can never trust him to get there. He's been submitted. His IQ on the feet isn't great, and he's losing minutes going for spinning attacks. And I do think because of that, I favor the accuracy, the power, and the overall boxing of Josh Culibao to go over here and win some minutes. And I do think he is my pick to win this week. If the line continues to come in, I might have a play on him because I do think he wins more times than not, but a very interesting match nonetheless. DraftKings-wise, though, he is 8.5K, and I do think he does have some KO equity. He has yet to score above 76 points on DraftKings, maybe a bit dangerous, but maybe that low box score makes him a solid contrarian play in this mid-range. 8.5K, I do think he has volume, knockdown, and KO upside this week, and I will be sprinkling some of him in GPP formats. Flip side of things, I think if Ramos wants to win, it's going to have to put a forward pace on him, have to land a lot of volume, maybe some grappling. Scored 98 against Algio, 106 against Gregori. I think that he has an upside as well. So this is a fight I'm really sneakily liking this week. A solid pivot play. I do think it plays out at a high pace. I favor Culibao, and I will have some of him on DraftKings. But a very interesting match nonetheless. Give me Josh Culibao. And then the prelim headliner, some big boys, the two brothers of some higher ranked guys in this division, the 5-2 junior Tafa versus the 11-1 Walter Walker. This is the toughest fight for me to call on the slate, if I'm being honest. It's two guys who I think have their definite path to victories, and I do think the winner looks hindsight like a very large favorite. No pun intended due to their heavyweight size. Junior Tafa is going to be the much better striker, great hand speed, phenomenal power, decent leg kicks as well, but he can be taken down, he can be controlled, and that's exactly what Walter Walker wants to do. Walter Walker is a very slow striker on the feet, very plodding, can be hit as well, but he wants to grapple. He wants to shoot takedowns. And although he lost last time, he was able to land 4 of them against Brzeski in that matchup. Now, That wasn't a good look, but Junior Tafa can be stuck on bottom position. I do think, like I said, the winner is going to look like a hindsight favorite. So where do I stand? Do I take the hometown powerful striker who, if he wins, is probably getting an early knockout, or do I take the wrestler like Walter Walker? And I'm struggling back and forth. I think I'm going to go with the wrestler here. I typically do lean towards the wrestling. I do think if they're able to shoot for the hips and get them on their back, I do think Tafa's stuck down there. And I do think it's a dangerous connotation trusting a guy like Walter to do that for all 3 rounds. But I think he can. I think he's a path. And I do think against a guy like Tafa, having the size and power he does, I do think he is someone who can stay safe on the feet, take him down to the ground. Now, is just say lock, super max, go whale play? Definitely not. I do think Tafa could definitely catch him. And the later this fight goes, the cardio is still a question for Walker. But until then, give me the grappler here in Walker. DraftKings wise, though, both of them are very, very live. 8.2K in Tafa's wins. He scored 103. And that's it. He's only one win in the UFC. And I think he's a phenomenal play at 8.2K if he wins. Flip side of things, Walker, we have yet to see him reach the optimal lineup or even to a win in the UFC. But when it does come, it's going to come with grappling success. He's a guy in front of him who can be taken down, can be held down. And I do think that Walker has a solid ceiling this week. 8K, 8.2K, right in the middle. I do love this fight. Give me Walker. It was a pretty close one. Opening up the main card, we have the 19-6 Carlos Prates, 19-8 Jingliang Li. And I love Carlos Prates. I've backed on him a lot. I made a lot of money on him. The guy's a very fun striker to watch. He's got very good power, very good entries on his shots, and he has done really well so far in the UFC. I mean, only 2-0, but some dominant performances, scoring very well in the process. And now he faces the Leech, a veteran of the UFC. A guy who's been at the top for a while, and definitely a tough matchup here for Prates. I'm surprised at the line, though. I mean, I'm picking Prates. I expected him to be slightly favored, but to this extent it's a bit surprising because the Leech is still a light guy who is a phenomenal striker in his own right with a lot of power. And I mean, seeing him this much of an underdog against still a young and up-and-coming prospect in Prates is interesting. Prates is a phenomenal striker, though. He builds really well as the fight goes on. Phenomenal range control, phenomenal power, good step in knees, and a guy who's just a danger to go against on the feet. He can be taken down, though, and we have seen him knocked out in the regional scene, so his chin is still something that really has to be tested, and maybe it will be here. But Jingliang Li, a guy with a ton of power in his own right, a very good striker. He himself can be taken down. He himself can be pushed against the cage, but when it comes down to it, he can land powerful shots. He can knock your lights out, and I do think Prates is going to have to keep his wits about him in this matchup. More times than not, I think Prates picks him up from the out part, makes his read as the fight goes on, is able to find that knockout blow on Li. Li can be hit, and the power of Prates and the reads he makes is no joke. I do think Prates is one of the most fluent strikers we've seen in the UFC. However, I do have to be careful, though. Prates does keep his hands pretty low, and Li does have a powerful shot. So if the line is too wide in a Li KO, I might go out there and try to get some value on this one. But more times than not, I do think this fight ends by KO. I do think more times than not, it's Prates delivering him, and he is my pick to win. DraftKings-wise, though, some slight interest on this one. Prates does have a ton of KO equity, and he's someone who can land a ton of volume, but at 9.2K, am I playing him over Gamrot, Jenkins, Nicoll, Erceg? Like, it's just so hard to go up there and get to him, even though he has put up 106 points before. He is extremely boomer bust. If he doesn't get an early knockout, he's going to get outscored by these grapplers or these guys above him who do have easier matchups. So for that reason, I am hesitant to play him. Flip side of things, Li Jingliang, $7,000. I think when he wins, he breaks the slate. A ton of power, should be lower owned this week, so he's another dog I'm looking to sprinkle in. Not the most confidence, I am picking Prates to win, but I will have some slight ownership of Leech in some GDP tournaments. He does have power, and it is no joke. And then we're on to Australian fighters the rest of the way, including the 14-7 Tai Tuivasa versus the 14-5 Jairzinho Rozenstriuk. Big boys throwing down. They're going to get their striking match. They don't have to worry to be taken down. Who prevails in what is a fun, heavy-handed heavyweight affair? And I do think it's one where I'm surprised to see the line where it is. Everyone loves Tai Tuivasa. He's a guy who's going to be in front of his home crowd, is able to go out there, land powerful shots. Underdog to a guy Jairzinho. And I kind of get it. Jairzinho's the way more polished striker with a lot more extensive kickboxing background, and Tai Tuivasa has not looked great in his past performances. But it's so hard for me not to pick Tuivasa here, a guy who's in front of that home crowd, who is going to look to go out there and exchange, and a guy who I do think can withstand more damage than Jairzinho in front of him. Now, Jairzinho's just able to go out there and survive the plotting guy in Gatsiev, so maybe I'm wrong about this one, but I do think the line should be a bit closer, and I do think when it comes down to it, the powerful hooks of Tuivasa, him going forward, laying the pressure, potentially looking to just blitz in on Jairzinho the same way Francis did, or people who have knocked out Jairzinho before, maybe a way for me to like him this week. So I'm cheering for Tai. I'm definitely cheering for him. Picking him, maybe. Betting him, probably not. I don't think I'll get to the window on him, but let's pick Tai Tuivasa this week. I think he can go out there, close the distance, go forward, and if they're just going to swing dicks, for lack of a better word, I do think that he'll go out there and he's able to land the more damaging shots as well as absorb more damage here. Very interesting matchup, but in a heavyweight slugfest between two guys like this, I'm going to take the hometown guy with more of the crowd behind him and with a lot to lose in this one here. He's finally getting a striking matchup, and I do think he gets back to the winning track here. Super fun fight. I do not fault anybody for taking Rozenstriuk. It is interesting. DraftKings wise, though, like I said, they're going to go out there, they're going to swang and bang. 7.3K. You have a guy in Tuivasa in front of that home crowd who, in his last wins, scored 95, 99, 104, 130, 116. Very good option on DraftKings. I'll be playing him. Of course, there's risk, and of course, Rozenstriuk can knock his lights out, but you gotta puncher's chance. It's heavyweight, 7.3K, one of my favorite GVP targets. I do think he has more chance than the line entails. I do not fault anybody for taking Rozenstriuk. I mean, he scored 93 in his last matchup, was able to knock out Doc and score 130. When he wins, it's probably landing on a guy in Tuivasa who is extremely hittable, who is there to be countered, and I do think he has a solid amount of upside as well. However, with the premium you have to pay for them, and with a lot of other really good solid options on this card, I much prefer the Tuivasa side on DraftKings. Give me Tuivasa, give me Bam Bam, and what is a fun heavyweight slugfest. Let's move on. And move on we do to the 23-12 Dan Hooker versus the 24-2 Mateus Gamrot. Now, like I said, hometown guy, once again, a lot of Australians on this card. Fun one at that. And Dan Hooker is a guy who is very well known, very good fighter who I've been lucky enough to make some money on, and a guy who's just out there fun to watch. He has fought the best of the best. I mean, his only loss is coming to Poirier, Chandler, Makhachev, and Arnold Allen in those last four. He has also fought some amazing level of competition from Jalen Turner to Felder to Quinton. Like, the guy has been at the top for a while, put on some insanely fun fights. He has got great length, great power, great knees. They call him the Hangman for a reason. He's a fun fighter to watch. I do think he's very talented. He's facing Gamrot, though. Gamrot, who has been at the top of the division for a while. Only 2 losses inside the UFC, and both coming to very solid competition in his own right, in Kutaladze and Dariush, a guy who is a very forward-pressing wrestler. He has a very good pace, ton of takedown upside. Landed 11 in his last matchup there, and a guy who does have some solid control. He is very physically imposing, is able to take down opponents, keep them there, threaten submissions. Got that Kimura against Stevens, which was pretty dangerous, but also some solid power on the feet. He's pretty well rounded, and a guy who I do think is able to go out there and win minutes, win optics, and definitely a really solid prospect. He's also been at the top for a while. He's got some decent wins under his belt, but a guy who's going to have one clear mindset in this matchup, and that's going to be take down Hooker and keep him there. Hooker's a guy who I do think is going to be the better striker of the two, land more damage on the feet, be more dangerous on the feet. But when it comes to the mat, Gamrot is the much better wrestler in my opinion. It has the opportunity to take him down, has the opportunity to threaten things as well, and should be able to control him similar he did to Turner. Now, when it comes to my pick to win, gun to my head, I'm picking Gamrot. But the line is kind of wide. We saw Gamrot get criticized, almost lose the fight to Turner because he wasn't doing anything. He was controlling him, he was going to keep him down there, and he wasn't landing much damage. And I think when it comes down to it, Hooker has way more upside to land damage on the feet. He can go out there, land those powerful shots. He's able to get back up. I think he's dangerous in that second, third round of forward press to land big shots on a guy like Gamrot. More times than not, I do think Gamrot's able to get that control time. I do think he's able to seal off rounds and hold him down there. Similarly to how we've seen Hooker control before, I do think it's an extremely fun matchup, but I gotta pick the more boring option of the two here in Gamrot. I just think he's more skilled, has more paths to win, and I do think as much as it goes against my better judgment, I have to pick him in this matchup due to that grappling upside he does have. DraftKings wise, I don't mind Gamrot. I think a lot of people are going to be on Hooker this week. People like Hooker. But when you look at a guy in Gamrot, he scored 131 last time. Before that, maybe not the most upside, but he's going to have takedown opportunities here. He's going to have the opportunity to go out there and land damaging shots. And although it's been against the highest level of competition, Hooker's been finished in the first round in his last 3 losses. And I do think that is not outside the realm of possibilities that Gamrot can threaten something. Gamrot can look to land damage on the top position and be a sneaky option 9.3K. He has the best amount of wrestling out of the top 4 this week. And I do think because of that, he's a guy I'm looking to play. Flip side of things, Hooker has damage in himself. He has the opportunity to go out there, turn the fight in an instant, land that powerful shot. At 6.9K, he could break the slate with some upside here. So he is also a very good option in GBP formats. Both him and the Leech are very similar. It's like, I don't think they win too often. I think the line is wide, and when they do win, it scores very well. More times than not, they are being beaten in their respective areas, so it's hard to go out there and say they win in a high clip. But give me some of both on DraftKings. I'm picking Gamrot, cheering for Hooker, but I do think Gamrot has more tools to get it done. Co-main event time, 12-2 Steve Erceg versus the 24-11 Kai Kara France. Hometown guys going at it this weekend. 2 guys from down under throwing bombs, and I do think it's a very fun matchup. Kai Kara France is a guy who I've been a bit harder on, very solid striker, good hand speed, has got some solid wins at the top of the division, has worked on that takedown defense as well, and has looked pretty good. You can argue he won that last fight against Albazi. You can argue that he was winning against Moreno until he got hit there. A guy who's fought the best of the best and looked pretty good at that. Steve Erceg has made a quick surge to the top. In just over a year, he fought Dvorak, Costa, Matt Snell, and then all the way to Pantoja, and almost won that fight against Pantoja. He was very, very close If it wasn't for that grappling exchange in the 5th round, he could have won the belt. He could be the champion right now, and he's won over a lot of people's hearts. He himself is a very, very solid fighter, and I do think it makes for a very high-level matchup. I think when it comes down to striking of the two, both are phenomenal strikers. Kai France has, I think, the better boxing, better hand speed, but Steve Erceg can definitely compete. He's working on it himself. I think he can throw more kicks in there as well and look to be a threat going forward, win optics that way. I also think that when it comes down to it, although Kai France has a phenomenal takedown defense and can stay on the feet, Steve Erceg, I do think he's going to be the better grappler of the two, able to take the back, threaten takedowns here, and win minutes that way. And I think because of that, all these things added together, my pick to win is going to be Steve Erceg this week. I think he has more pats getting it done, and I do think that the discrepancy in the takedown upside is larger than the discrepancy in the striking. I do think Steve Erceg can hold his own, and I do think because of that, we have ourselves a very fun striking exchange. Am I extremely bullish on either side? No, I think it's very plausible that Kai France wins the boxing and is able to win the fight because of that. But Steve Erceg will go forward. He has shown to be pretty durable, and he can mix in takedowns, and on the feet he can hold his own as well. So he is my pick to win overall. Should be a phenomenal co-main event. DraftKings wise though, I'm not getting to it. I think if anything, I'm on the Kai France side of things. Erceg 8.8K. I guess he does have takedown upside, but I don't see him outscoring someone who with KO1 equity like Kanan or Rozenstriuk, or the wrestling of Nicoll, or the first round upside of Santos, or the knockout upside of Culibao. Like, there's so many high upside guys that for a fighter at Erceg, who I think goes all 15 minutes more times than not, 8.8K is a bit of a steep price tag. Instead, Kai France, although not the best DraftKings scorer, I mean, only scoring 53 against Askarov in that decision, 61 against Nam, 62 against Paiva. I think when you need underdogs to win this week, he is someone who has 7.4K, does have the volume, does have the boxing, and potential damage upside to go out there and be a viable underdog for you this week at 7.4K. Not my favorite play on DraftKings, but a fun fight overall, and one where I am picking Steve Erceg, but a truly competitive, high-level 125 affair. Then on to the main event, 24-3 Israel Adesanya, 21-2 Dricus du Plessis. I saw Dricus go out there win his belt in Canada. He beat Sean Strickland. I didn't think he did. I thought Sean Strickland won that fight. But here, nonetheless, we have the whole Africa versus Africa narrative, one where I don't get it or care too much. I don't think it's worth getting too much in arms about it. Dricus du Plessis is from Africa. He's South African, and I don't know why people get so mad over it, all right? At the end of the day, though, what we have is a fight. I don't care about the antics outside of the cage. We have ourselves a cage fight, and it's one that should be a very high-level one that's very fun. And coming straight off the bat is I'm picking a guy in Adesanya here. I have never been the biggest Adesanya guy. I think I picked Whitaker against him the second time. I gave some credits to Paulo Costa maybe finishing him. I'm not the biggest Adesanya guy, but I do think he has a guy in front of him who is one of the least technical fighters he's fought in a while. Dricus du Plessis is a brute, solid power, phenomenal power, decent wrestling, just cage pushing, but a guy who just wants to be the more physical fighter of the two, look to dominate you in that aspect. The same way he did to Whitaker, he goes out there and he's able to land these powerful shots. Cardio, he's been able to work on, but a guy who relies on the optics of his hooks and the power he's able to bring forward, but who can be touched at range. I think Strickland was a bit too hesitant on it, and when it comes to this matchup here, we have a guy throwing these crazy wild hooks with a ton of power versus a extremely slick kickboxer in Adesanya, who has been at the top for a while, who, if he found that motivation again, is going to be levels above, in my opinion, when it comes down to the technical striking. Now, grappling upside, I do think you give towards DDP, but Adesanya defended takedowns against almost everybody he's fought so far. He has shown great takedown defense, and if his heart's in the right place, he's a phenomenal striker. And let's not forget, he was still minus 800 or minus 600 against a guy like Sean Strickland, whereas du Plessis was an underdog to him. He had an off night, his heart wasn't in it, and now it is. Now he's back, he's motivated by something. I'm just happy he's motivated again, and I do think more times than not, he's able to reclaim that gold, land the powerful shots, and show everyone why he was the champion for so long. I'm going to Israel Adesanya this week. Is there a chance that he's not his own self, that he's getting older? Maybe. But Dricus, to me, is a guy who's going to need that knockout shot. He's going to need to go out there and land that powerful shot. And of course, there's a chance he can get it, but I don't want to rely on that. I think more times than not, Adesanya's able to win the optics, maybe even land some counters and get a finish himself, and I don't think he should be an underdog in this matchup. I'm throwing aside that last Sean Strickland fight, and I'm picking Adesanya to win. Phenomenal main event, but I think Adesanya gets his gold back, putting aside all the non-love, let's put it that way, I have for him. So give me Adesanya. DraftKings-wise, I mean, he's 8.3K. You don't have to pay that much for him. Historically, not the best DraftKings scorer. I mean, he once put up 49 points in a win, 5-round win over Romero. But a guy who does have KO upside, does have volume upside. He's not a must-play, but a guy who I will be having in my lineup because I do think he wins, and he has 5 rounds to work. Du Plessis, if you think he wins, is a great play because in his wins, she's only won so far in the UFC, averaged 110 points, scoring everywhere from 125 points against Till and only scoring below 100 points once. I think he has 5 rounds to work. I think he's got power, and I think his path to victory is reliant on finishing Adesanya. I don't think it happens too often, but when it does, it scores very, very well. So pick your poison there. I think if you're picking Adesanya to win, you don't necessarily have to have him. If you're picking DDP to win, you got to have him in your lineup this week, just based on their styles. But that's going to do it for me here on the Plays and Fades YouTube channel. Quickly running through my quick picks. We're taking Israel Adesanya, Steve Erceg, Mateus Gamrot, Ty Tuivasa, Carlos Prates, Valter Walker, Josh Culibao, Casey O'Neill, Jack Jenkins, Tom Nolan, Kanang Song, and Stuart Nicoll. DraftKings wise, I think it's super tough to get up to Nolan and Jenkins this week with the amount of options we have. I really like Gamrot. I think Nicoll has some solid takedown upside as well. And then this mid-range is filled with people with knockout opportunities. Rozenstriuk, Kanan, Culibao, Santos all have a ton of power in their hands. Even Tafa, if you want to include him as well. I think my favorite one down there is probably either Culibao in that mid-range or even Song Kanang. I think going on to Santos, she doesn't win, but when she does, she scores very well. Solid GPP. Underdog-wise, Valter Walker and his wrestling upside, DDP with 5 rounds to work, Casey O'Neill with her volume, and then I really do like Tai Tuivasa, Li Jinglei, Hooker as my punt plays this week. All 3 of them maybe don't win all too often. When they do, you're going to have some ownership of them because they have so much knockout and power upside. Betting-wise, check me out on Twitter at GamblesGordo to either tail my bets or go against me the way things are going. Who knows? But check me out on Twitter at GamblesGordo. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Check out Established Run. Check out Cool, but check us out for Dana White Contender Series later in the week. And I appreciate you guys for tuning in. Wish you all the best of luck on our DraftKings and betting endeavors, guys, and let's make some money.